Blacka with us from Go Penguin. A big fan of Go Penguin. I've been following you guys for quite a few years now, and I've really loved where you've been going with this. And I would love to take this opportunity to kind of discover who you are, what brought you into the scene.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot. I'm glad you like the music. Well, I was a bass player just based in Manchester, and with the band, we just all met on the Manchester scene, playing gigs, and like any city and any scene, you get to know all the players, and eventually we all came together. Me and Rob, the drummer, have been friends for I don't even know how long, but it's a very long time. So we've been doing that, like various bands, countless things, all kinds of styles as well. We used to do tons of jazz gigs together, and then like folk and funk and hip hop and wedding gigs, everything. So like Go Penguin sort of started with a different bass player, and then it didn't work out, and they got me involved, and that's sort of how we came together to be what it is today.
That's incredible. I love where you guys are going with that. I saw you on the Tiny Desk concert. I thought that was incredible. That was a great concert. And that leads me, when we think about upright players, I mean, obviously Medeski Martin Wood is kind of like, they were kind of laid the groundwork for bands like yours.
Yeah.
And a lot of other bands like Medeski Martin Wood, Soul Alive, bands of that nature, kind of creating a lot of groove based material. And like I said, I've been following your stuff for a long time, and I loved Ocean in a Drop, which I think, you're playing electric on one track on that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
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 Cause I remember listening to that. I was like, I think he's playing a P bass on there. Cause I'm so used to you with your upright and all the stuff that you do with your upright. And I was like, no way. So, that led to discussions with my friends around, what you guys were doing and the development with that. And I love that in the background, you have several basses hanging up, no uprights in sight.
Yeah. Well, for the Ocean in a Drop thing, it was, we actually did a live film score back in 2015. So we were asked, there was this, it's like an arts venue in Manchester. They were opening up a new venue. And so they asked lots of bands in Manchester if they wanted to do like a score to a silent movie. And we had a few other things in mind, but we ended up doing, in the end, this film called Koi and Skazzi, which is kind of a cult classic, and it's kind of it's got like an environmental message and all kinds of stuff. So it was quite an ambitious project. So we decided to do a score for that. We got permission to do it. And then we actually performed. It's like an hour and 25 minutes or something like that. And we performed the whole thing live with the movie behind us for audiences. So for the Ocean in a Drop thing, it was, some of the music didn't really work for like without the images. So we kind of condensed it into an EP. But that track that you're talking about, Control Shift,
yeah,
it came from this crazy thing that Chris had written. And he'd kind of sent me this MIDI project idea, and he's like, do you think you could play this? And it's like, I don't think anyone could play that on the upright bass. It's ridiculous. I mean, even if you could, it's just like that you wouldn't be able to hear the articulation of the notes and stuff because it was so fast.
sure.
So it was a really good a good reason to. It was actually that jazz bass there that I played. Yeah, to pull out the jazz bass and because that's what I started on the electric and then graduated to upright. So so for that EP, it's nice to play a bit of electric. That's how that came about.
Well, can you give us some insight into your development as a musician? How did it start, and how did you find yourself playing bass?
Well, it started when I was 13. So I didn't have any like musical training or musical background or anything, but like I'm not from a musical family where everyone's playing the piano and stuff. But I've got an older brother, and so obviously as a younger brother, I listened to a lot of his music, and his friends had a band, and one day I just they were playing in like the school assembly. So when I first heard the bass guitar just playing like a riff, a hook, it was actually off a Stone Roses tune, which are a Manchester band that you may have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I don't know what it is about that sound, but I love it, and I want to try and just go towards it. So I just went back and said to my mum, I want to get a bass guitar, and she just thought it was a flash in the pan, and I wasn't that interested, but saved up for ages and got a bass guitar and was just obsessed with it. I got given this book and I didn't really understand it because there was a lot of theory in it. So this was before I'd even got a bass guitar. But I just was so obsessed with it, I'd read it. And so I learned what all the notes on the neck were before I got a bass.
It wasn't the Mel Bay book, was it, by any chance, with the rundown of the notes?
It probably was. It was kind of like a thin book. I don't know.
The little half, like, quarter book. I think that wasn't Mel Bay. That was somebody else, but it was in that line where they just had the neck running down. It's like step by step, every note of the neck.
It had that, and I remember a page, it said like the root fifth connection, and I was like, what's a fifth? I didn't have a clue about any of it at the time, but I was really obsessed. So anyway, I just played and practiced and ended up getting better, and then eventually wanted to study, so I went to music college and got a really good bass teacher there who played the upright, and that's kind of what got my interest in making the transition.
Oh wow! So it was in college that they switched from electric to upright.
Yeah. Well, I was about 18, 19 when I moved to upright.
Okay. You have a real unique take on it too, because you're using a lot of effects. You're creating a lot of textures with it. When I went to school I studied upright in college as well, and it was like I was there during a period where everybody's like, oh, you don't even want to use an amp. It's like, oh, you shouldn't, go traditional. And, and that, when I think I met Chris Wood up in David Gage's shop years ago. I was in there picking up a Realist pickup, and I was like, just blew my mind. I was like, this is what I want to do. And when I heard Chris Wood, I was like, oh, that's the direction. And he was doing all of that stuff. They were with Medeski Martin Wood. They were just blowing things out, and you're doing a lot of the same, not same, but similar, sculpting a palette of sound using the upright as kind of this tool for your your paintbrush.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I always wanted to do. I got sort of inspired by a lot of bands and a lot of music at the time that were combining stuff, using a lot of jazz samples and a lot of there was a lot of upright bass happening in dance music in the UK, in like a lot of music coming out of Bristol, the trip hop sound, but also Manchester, and so I just wanted to get that beautiful upright tone and just try and make it really prominent. So you do have to go down the route of effects and pickups, and well, maybe not effects, but you do have to be able to amplify it well and use pickups, to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And I think I saw that you have a mic, actually. You have it pushed into the bridge that you're using as well. So are you using a pickup system and the microphone to kind of get the overtones with the fundamental?
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a lot going off, really. I use a Yamaha pickup, which isn't like hugely well known. There's some really popular ones, like you mentioned, the Realist, which I did use for quite some time, especially when I was doing more sort of like jazz gigs around Manchester. And I like that pickup. It sounds really good. It's got a really nice bottom end to it, really sort of warm, earthy sound. But when the go-go thing started to take off and the venues were getting bigger, it wasn't something that worked for what we were doing. So having tried many pickups, the one that we really liked, I say we, me and our sound engineer Joe, we went with a Yamaha, which is a Japanese company. He makes piano pickups as well, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Fishman Full Circle, but
of course.
yeah, of course you are. It's very much like that, but it's got the two wheels on the bridge, so I think it just gets a bit of a better tonal range for me. You get it from both sides of the bridge.
Are you using? I mean, are you the stage volume? Is your stage volume fairly loud, or like? Have you ever seen the Bad Plus? The Bad Plus is probably the loudest jazz band, if we use the term jazz loosely. The loudest jazz band I've ever seen live. And
Yeah.
I don't know how he's not feeding back constantly. It's like he must be muting the hell out of his bass to be
Mm.
able to produce that volume. And like you guys, when I've seen you, the volume, the level out front, I mean, compared to stage volume is always different. But how are
Mm.
you able to prevent the feedback issue? I mean, with any good upright, I mean, feedback's always an issue.
Yeah, we've really worked on it, and some of the things that we've done, I didn't actually think were possible at the beginning. But we've just got a great sound engineer, and it's been a lot of trial and error with various things. I mean, sometimes you get a bit of feedback if it's really loud through the monitors on stage, but generally it's not hugely loud on stage, but I think it is out front. I mean, we're sort of in a territory now where people question whether we're a jazz band at all, so it's sort of, I don't really want to open up that can of
Yeah.
worms, but
You know what
um,
what is jazz anymore? I think
yeah,
the reality is you're on Blue Note still, right? So Blue
yeah,
Note is still the label. Medeski Martin
yeah,
Wood is also on Blue Note. And I think that jazz as developmental, I mean it's developed over time, just like any genre. It develops over time. And I think, you guys, I love what you're doing. It's instrumental music. And normally when I describe it to somebody, especially with students, I've turned so many students onto your stuff. I'm like, you have to listen to what these guys are doing because you seem to be, and I was going to ask you what your influences were, but I think like what I hear, from you, like influence from you guys, I hear some Aphex Twin. I hear some, I'm hearing like video game music at times. I'm hearing a lot of like almost like the 8-bit orchestra type stuff kind of coming into what you guys are doing. And it's like you're being influenced by all these sounds around you, and it's producing this really unique sound. Um, would you mind elaborating on what influences, what drives the band?
well, I mean, it's obviously the influences of three people, but we all find a bit of a common ground in a love of electronic music. So you mentioned Aphex Twin. I think especially for Rob, our drummer, because of the way he plays, he's really adapted some of that sort of, well, it always gets called skittering kind of drum sound. It sounds a lot like it. He's listened to tons of Aphex Twin and tried to do what he can, just sort of playing. So that's a big influence on the group, but it's just a common ground because we're all quite different really as people, and we all like similar stuff, but then some stuff that's different as well. So it's like we meet in the middle is sort of electronica and jazz. And me and Rob were, like I mentioned before, we used to be in like a more straight ahead jazz band that just played bebop basically. So
Nice.
we've got that.
It's funny when I hear him play, he always reminds me of Jojo Mayer. There's some elements
Yeah,
of that style of playing because they're both influenced by a lot of electronic drumming. I
yeah,
hear those elements, and Jojo Mayer's a monster as well. Um,
yeah. We did a gig with him shared the bill with him in Switzerland
with
a while
Nerve.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, he's great drummer. So my role in all of that, I mean, when I joined Go Penguin back in the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, I'd just gone through a really big sustained period of just being really into like straight ahead jazz,
Mhm.
into bebop, Christian McBride,
Oh yeah.
Oscar Pettiford, Paul Chambers, all those guys. And it just sort of coincided with a time when I wasn't getting fed up with that. I love that music, but there was just something that I thought I kind of want to go back to where I'd started and where I'd sort of found inspiration for getting into jazz at the beginning. And so Go Penguin was a platform to try and change some of these things. So I came in being like a real trying to find my feet with it really in a way, like who am I as a player? And at first I was a little bit tentative, like don't play loads of jazz stuff because I don't want to just be like that token
Mhm.
jazz bass player in this band. And then like everything started coming together. But I think a lot of my influences, I mean, Avishai Cohen was a huge influence because when he first came on the scene, I saw him when I was about 19 in a place called Oldham, which is just outside of Manchester, playing with Chick Corea. I'd never heard of him before. I'd heard of Chick Corea. I'd never heard
Yeah.
of Avishai Cohen.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, who's that guy? and so he's been a big inspiration. I think he had a real impact on the upright sort of in the early 2000s, particularly some of the albums he was bringing out.
Absolutely.
So that influenced me as a player, but just trying to incorporate all the things that I love about the upright bass and the players, and if there's a space for it. I mean, there's not always a space for some of the stuff we do. You know, I've like spent a lot of time transcribing bebop solos and stuff, and that style of playing doesn't really work within this band. It's more of a modal kind of thing. There's not like tons of changes going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I just take inspiration from anything that sounds like it would fit within that. You know, a lot of crossover players. My teacher back when I was in college, one of my first bass teachers was playing with like a trip hop kind of electronic music band called Lamb. And so he was a bit of an inspiration because he was sort of doing something really different with the upright bass, but you know, like within
kind of
dance
like
music.
The Goldie inspiration. Like, have you ever listened?
All that stuff. Yeah.
Very cool. I was going to ask you who your influences were, like who kind of shaped you as a bass player. I mean, because you mentioned Paul Chambers, you mentioned Oscar Pittaford. Like those are some huge names. Like those are some huge players. But on your electric, who were some of the influences you had for that? Because since that was like that was your first instrument.
Yeah. So on the electric, it was initially. Well, I just loved the sound of it, so I got to know a lot of the guys who played like indie stuff. But then when I was like branching out, it was like funk. I sort of discovered Funkadelic, and so One Nation Under a Groove. I think that's the albums that's got Bootsy Collins on, and then that sort of led to things like the JBs and obviously again Bootsy Collins. But I went through a massive Jacko phase because
I think everybody does.
Yeah,
it's required. Everybody has to do it. It's like you got a bass. Okay, here's your rules. We'll start with Little Jocko. We'll move you to Little Geddy Lee. Then we'll we'll move out from there.
I was pretty obsessed with Jacko for a good few years, and you know he's amazing, wasn't he? So those you know the album, the debut album, and word of mouth as well. There's some beautiful compositions. So those guys and. Now I don't listen to tons of electric bass players as like, you know, an influence, but I do really like Pino Palladino.
Oh God, yeah. Stuff, yeah, who doesn't?
You know, yeah, it's just
that's like sacrilege if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's just really laying it down though, isn't it? You know, I'm really glad this whole sort of tradition of the P basses with flat wounds kind of came back, and that really rekindled my interest in playing the electric bass again, because it's like, I mean, there are some great players who get around it, you know, and that's incredible. But I do love that sort of that really good tone, holding it down style of playing.
Absolutely, yeah. Pino is like, you know, it's funny. I was just talking to Tim LaFay about this because we were talking about Pino Palladino and Tony Levin. You know, those guys are just amazing, and like. That Try album, you ever listen to John Mayer Try album with Steve Jordan and Pino on it?
Yeah.
That album just blows me away every single time I hear it. I'm like, it just makes me you hear Pino and you're just like, I just wish. Just such a great player. He really is a monster.
He is, yeah. I remember my first bass guitar teacher that I had. He got me playing some of the really early Pino stuff. You know, when he played fretless with like Paul Young. And,
Lady in Red.
And I thought that stuff was great. But then when I sort of rediscovered he was doing things with the P bass and the flat wounds and the D'Angelo voodoo stuff and all that, it's like
Nine Inch Nails. Oh my God, the Nine Inch Nails thing was like the Who. You know, it's like this guy is a chameleon of bass, man.
I didn't know he did things with Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, he did that. He did that last tour with them.
Really?
Yeah. You got to hear All Time Low. It's on like Jimmy Kimmel Live. When you hear him playing on that, it's what got to be the best groove I've heard. In no offense, it's got to be the best groove I've heard in like probably like 15 years. Like his playing, wow. He's so in the pocket and just on it, and it's simplicity, but it's beauty and simplicity. He's just a monster.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can definitely find it out there. It's Jimmy Kimmel Live, All Time Low.
Right.
It, it
Okay.
it's amazing. It truly is amazing.
Yeah.
So
I'll have a look. Yeah, I was listening. He's done an album with Blake Mills as well recently.
mhm.
I was listening to that earlier today, actually, just for I only listened to about 3 tracks because I was busy with something else. But that's pretty interesting. Some of the music's quite strange, but there's some
Yeah,
great
with
bass
the
playing
horn
on
and the samples.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's wild. It's some wild stuff,
yeah,
man. Let's talk about a Humdrum Star. Is that okay if we bring that up?
yeah, yeah.
What that album's incredible, by the way. I love
Thank
that
you.
album. I like that. I loved your other stuff, but that album, like Raven on there, like it's just an amazing album. Like, what were some of the inspirations for that? I mean, I know that's from 2018. It's a little
Hmm.
ways out, but that album is like such a masterpiece, I feel like. And I like things just like you guys when you guys toured on it, I think you did Tiny Desk on that one too. And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was just amazing. Like I'm not saying, and I don't want to. It's actually on my playlist at the moment, but I mean, I love what you guys did last year with the Go Go Penguin with the 2020 release. I don't know if you
Hmm.
can see that in there. It's kind of hard to see, but that one right there,
Yeah, yeah.
that and fanfares. I mean, fanfares is great too, but um, Humdrum Star, like it's just from beginning to end. It's just there's no lulls.
Well, that's great. No, yeah, it's great to hear because when you speak to people about our albums, they often cite different ones as their favorites. I mean, a lot of people love V2.0,
Oh yeah.
and but yeah, that's interesting. And I was when we finished Humdrum Star, and I think we all felt this. We had a real sense of we'd done some good work there. We were all very happy with it. So it's nice to hear. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Um, but yeah, some of the inspiration behind it. I mean, like, well, Raven, I think I mentioned it on the Tiny Desk briefly, but that was a track that Chris had an idea for, and he'd actually had a dream that he was playing chess against a raven, which is pretty abstract, pretty surreal, but he genuinely did, and then sort of named this track after it. And that was something that he was playing around with some music software thing, a program called Reason,
Mhm.
and he'd actually that had been filed away for a good, I don't know, 3-4 years or something. And Rob rediscovered it and said, "Hey, do you remember this?" And then it was only the sort of intro chords and a bit of the intro, and then we built the track out of it. But yeah, that's where that one came from.
Yeah,
But
that's it's excellent. It's a great album. I just wanted to let you know. I'll get that
yeah,
opportunity
cheers.
often to tell people. But that was a huge album. Your album release in 2020 was a great album as well. And is there something on the horizon for Go Go Penguin? Because we're now in 2021. This last year has been kind of questionable for everybody because of COVID. Have you guys gotten together? Have you been able to work on anything?
We've got together. I have to say, at the beginning of lockdown, it was, well, it's a really strange time, and everyone was a bit like freaking out because we didn't know what was going to happen. But for us, it was like, well, if we've got to stay at home, we all did exactly that, and it was a bit of a relief, really, to be honest, to take our foot off the gas a bit, because we'd been touring so relentlessly and working so hard for so long that it was only when it stopped that we realized how hard we'd been doing it, and I think we just all needed that break. So quite a lot of the time we were just taking a bit of a break. But we've got together since. We have a studio space in near to Manchester City Centre, and we haven't really been writing anything particularly together for an album as yet. But we did get asked to do a film score last month, so we just finished doing that, and that's for a French movie that will be out sometime in the future. So we have kind of been busy behind the scenes, but not really doing anything towards a new record as of yet. But I mean, I'm sure we'll get started up fairly soon.
Very cool. Very cool. Can you tell me your bass is interesting? So you're using a traveling bass, like your upright, where
Yeah,
the neck actually comes off.
that's right. Yeah,
What is that's not your only bass, correct? That's just your travel bass.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what
Um,
what do you use? What is your recording? Do you use a different bass for recording versus your travel bass?
Yeah. So I've got it's actually I'm in my little music room at the moment, so it's in the corner there, but everything's quite disorganized. So I'm just looking at it. Yeah, the travel bass, it has a detachable neck, so it just goes in a case that ends up being the size of the bass's body. So it's still pretty big, like for walking into an airport, everyone looks at you, and there's a lot of questions about whether it'll go on the flight and stuff like that. Well, no, it always goes on the flight, but there's a lot of arguing about baggage charges and all that stuff. But
Sure.
For recording, I always use what I call my main bass, which is at the studio at the moment, and that's an old German bass. It's probably like turn of the century, maybe late 1800s, 1900 sort of age. I don't know the exact date on it. So, and I really love that bass. It's been with me for like 20 years or something now. So
nice. Yeah. It seems like people. I have an old German bass sitting in the back there that I've had since high school, and they just stay with you for years and years. That's one of the Roths. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah. I had a student earlier, so we were doing some stuff. But that it's interesting because I don't know if you can see in the other corner, I have one of the Azolas, and you're never bringing out an electric upright. You're always bringing the full thing, like you're bringing the full acoustic, which I find admirable because I've flown with my upright and I hate it. So if I have to do a flight with it, I throw the Azola in the bag and just check it.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't blame you for that at all, because we have run into a lot of problems over our touring lifetime, arguments in various airports at like 6 a.m. with some check-in desk or whatever, and so it does get tricky. But we've me and Joe, our sound engineer, he's a big part of it, and we just really, really wanted to stick with the upright for all of the gigs, and we were determined to do that no matter what. So I mean, it's been absolutely bashed up all around the world, and we've even got a small repair kit with some like wood glue, that like sort of a bit like the animal glue that you can be reheated. So
sure.
my luthier put me onto it and said, take a bottle of this, and if you need to, you can sort of, if there's a crack appears, you can put a strip of paper underneath and put some glue on, and when you get home, I'll fix it, and stuff like that. So we've been doing that in hotel rooms and everything, and the first travel bass now is no longer made it, so we've got a new one, but it works really well, and we've got the same pickups that we use for both basses, and yeah, it just works for me, and it's kind of important to have the upright, rather than
I mean, it definitely adds to the dimension of the band as well, like seeing it on stage versus showing up with a stick or like the electric. There's definitely an aura to having the physicality of the body on stage of the upright.
Yeah, I agree. And I used to play I've got a stick bass, and it was good. I used to play it with I used to play in a live band for a DJ years and years ago, and we did a lot of big festivals, and it was a 10-piece band. I don't think they would have been too keen on trying to work out how to get this bass loud enough. So I used a stick bass for that, and it was cool, but not for this band. I'm pretty determined to use a double.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Can I ask, are you using a German or French bow?
I'm using a French bow.
Oh.
You a German guy?
I am there. I started on French and switched over to German. I prefer the grip with the German. It just makes more sense for me, but depending on your needs.
Yeah, well, I kind of did the opposite. Well, no, I got a French bow, and then thought I'm not feeling the grip, and so then I went with the German, and I had a few lessons with that, but for some reason I just thought I was annoyed at myself for giving up on the French, and so I thought I'm going to go back to it, and I'm going to try and make that the one that I play. So for whatever reason, I just wanted to do that, and that's why I play French now.
Sure. That's awesome. That's awesome. Mm. Can you tell me a little bit? I see your P bass, and I saw that you had on Instagram. you had a photo of your P bass. What's the story behind it? What's the age on it? I see it on the wall behind you.
Yeah. So that's I really wanted to get a late 70s P bass, and not everyone loves the 70s ones, like there's went on all the forums, and a lot of people are like, oh well, some of them are good, some of them aren't, they can be really heavy, it depends on blah blah blah. Anyway, I decided that I wanted to get one, and so I've got a friend who works for like Yamaha and like Ampeg and stuff, and so he's in a lot of music shops, so I said, just check it out, see if you see one. And then I'd kind of forgotten about it, and I ended up buying a synth instead. I got a Moog grandmother synth, so I wasn't really looking. And then just around Christmas, he said, "Oh, I found you a '78 Precision," and I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay." And he said the guy can send it to you, and if you don't like it, you can send it back. It's fine, So I was like, okay, I may as well look at it. And as soon as I picked it up, I thought, I'm buying this. So yeah, it's a '78, and it's great. It's got like a lot of cracks and stuff down the lacquer.
Yeah,
but I love all that. I think
me too.
It's great.
Yeah, I recently picked up a 74. So
nice. Yeah,
it's all banged up perfectly. I'm a big fan of the. I prefer the 70s. I like the 70s as well, because the price point's still workable versus 10 grand for anything past 69.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I got this for a really good price. I was quite surprised. I've seen them going on eBay for like £1,000 more than I paid, so I did pretty well.
That's great. That's great. So, do you see it in the future in any of the Go-Go Penguin stuff?
Yeah, hopefully I do. The reason why there's not been a lot of bass guitar, well, there's a few reasons really. One, because I guess you could say I'm more of an upright player these days. That's kind of what I've become known for around Manchester, and then obviously with Go-Go. But it kind of works. Grand piano, drums, double bass. It's a tried and tested instrumental formula. Absolutely. It works. It's great. But there are times where I think, oh, it'd be nice to try this on bass guitar. And it's actually Rob, who's he's never been that big a fan of bass guitar. But around the end of last year, I had the Precision with the flat wounds, and I was playing it, and it was like the first time I've got, that sounds, I've heard him say, that sounds pretty good actually. And it's like, brilliant, we're in. So yeah.
And now you're going to be dragging a couple basses around. Instead of one big one, there's going to be several.
Yeah, well, when we were touring that, the film score, we toured it a little, and we played it in New York, and because we're not used to having the bass guitar, we got all the gear at the airport, landed at JFK, all jet lagged, got all the gear at the airport, went to the hotel, got putting all the gear in the lift, and then I realized that we'd left the bass guitar at JFK, so we had to get in a taxi and go all the way back to the airport to get it. So yeah.
So what are you using for amplification? How are you amplifying your upright and your electric?
They both go through an Ampeg SVT.
Oh, okay.
So again, more gear, really heavy.
Yeah.
Big valve amp.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah. We started using them again because when you're touring around like everywhere in the world, usually has an Ampeg SVT, every backline company. So you can usually get hold of one. So it's great that, I've got my bass, I've got an amp like mine. It just feels like being at home, really. Mm-hmm. But they sound great. I love the whole sort of like crunchy kind of sound that you can get out of it. Maybe not something that all upright players are looking for, but for me, it works really well. And I was chatting to Don Was, the head of Blue Note Records, because he's a bass player, and we did like this thing in Paris, and he was there, like it was like a little showcase for a humdrum star actually, and we were having a chat about bass gear, and he was like really impressed that I was using an Ampeg. He was like, oh, I love these as well. I use it with my upright. You don't see too many guys doing it, so got the stamp of approval off Don, which is nice.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, have you ever been into soul coughing at all? You ever listen to those guys?
No, I've never heard of them. Soul Coffee.
Soul Coughing, it's kind of the similar formula to Go-Go Penguin in a lot of ways. Like it's keyboard, drums, bass, upright bass, and Mike Dowdy, Dougherty or Dowdy. He's doing his own thing now, but Soul Coughing did like Circles. They were big in the 90s, but it was like kind of,
okay.
They were kind of ahead of the times with using upright as part of their lineup. And that bass player was on Fiona Apple's last album. Like he was a bass player on that, which was an incredible album all its own for the musicianship on it. It's just amazing. Her band is always incredible. But he's an incredible bass player, Sebastian something. But definitely check out, if you get a chance, check out Soul Coughing. I think you might dig them.
Yeah, I will.
A lot of really cool like upright bass grooves.
Yeah, great. Yeah, a couple of good recommendations there. Need to check out Pino Palladino with 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, and so anything from Soul Coughing, like was it Super Bonbon? Is a great song. I think you'd dig that.
Right. Okay. I'll make a mental note of it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your time and having you here with us with Bass Musician Magazine's a treat. It's like I said, I've been following your band and the development over these last 7 years. It's been like developing, and I'm really excited to see what you have in the future and where you might branch off to. Because will down the road, will there be horns? Do you ever see like a Go-Go Penguin with like guest musicians or anything like that?
Yeah, we get asked this quite a lot. We haven't really ever sort of felt the need to branch out of the 3 instruments up until now, but never say never. It might be quite interesting, maybe with a singer or something, if we could find the right vocalist, or who knows? You can never say never.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate your time. Like I said, I look forward to what's in the future for Go-Go Penguin.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you, sir. And with any time that with Bass Musician Magazine, really happy to have you here, and hopefully maybe we'll catch up again, in the future and see where you are, once COVID and everybody's back on the road.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, definitely.
Right. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks a lot.